shutting down a company of that size and parting ways with so many amazing people is heartbreaking. I felt the weight of the responsibility to our investors on my shoulders. And I felt that from the moment this realization hit, any day that we keep operating is taking this very good money that could be put in some other company that has a chance to succeed. It just, we set it on fire. And I used that spiritual energy of the responsibility to our VCs and to their LPs, etc., to say we need to shut it down as quickly as we can and basically return the money to our investors. And by that time, most of the money we raised was still in the bank account. So the pressure to shut down did not come because we needed to raise money or because we were running out, but because of an internal decision that it was devastating in many ways, because we loved the idea and we wanted it to succeed, and it was so ambitious and we worked so hard and the team was so amazing. Shutting down a company of that size and parting ways with so many amazing people is heartbreaking. But we felt it's just the right thing to do.
Hi, Roee. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Alex and Lee?
I mean, I think we're great. And especially, I was just telling Alex, I was like, I remember 9 years ago when we walked into the WeWork office in, I think it was downtown
222 Broadway.
Okay, so 222 Broadway. You had this beautiful office. I don't even know if it was your office or you're using someone else's office. And I was so intimidated and I was so nervous, just like I am right now. So anyways, thank you for being here. Before we kick it off, we have the most important question of the episode, which is, let's see your shoes. Because you're a shoe man, we always know you are very intentional with what you have on your feet. So let's see them first before we talk about any of the big topics.
Like, do I have to take them off my feet and bring them up, or like?
No, I think just raise your foot into the air. Let's see it.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be a lot more embarrassing. So here they are.
You never disappoint, Roee. This is incredible.
These are actually very, very special pair of sneakers. They're actually the first ones that I ever got in my appreciation of shoes journey in Mumbai in 2018. And I've been taking really good care of them. They are a beautiful pair of Asics that were recommended by a friend because I take really good care of them. Maybe too much, some would say. Yeah.
So you haven't walked in shit with them yet?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, if you said yes, then that's a great segue to what this whole episode is going to be about. Basically, building something beautiful, getting in shit, going to a different path. But anyways, let's kick this off. Alex, would you like to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, we have so much to talk about. I think you and us, all of us, have gone through ups and downs of joining unicorns, starting our own businesses, raising money, the ups and downs that go with that. I think today we really want to hone in on things that don't work, things that haven't gone our way. There's obviously a lot that have gone well for all of us, but I think what our listeners are really interested in, and it's sometimes a blocker for a lot of them to get into starting a business, is the fear of failure. How do I, stand back up after I fail? How do I talk to my friends about it? How do I talk to my family about it? But how do I personally use this as, an empowering feature to channel into something else? So I think there's a lot to talk about on that front. I think to go back to your journey, is there a specific first company you want to talk about? Should we dive into WeWork? Do you want to talk about Soluto first, or any other?
I failed so much, it's difficult to choose. There are so many amazing options to talk about. But I think that maybe I'll start by quoting a good friend of mine. I would say, in general, I'm really inspired by competitive sports when I think about entrepreneurship, because I always feel that our job as builders, as entrepreneurs, we can complain a lot about, life's challenging and difficult and you fail a lot, but it is all like so small compared to the lives of professional athletes. So I draw a lot of inspiration from there. I have a friend named Yarden Jerby. She just said a couple weeks ago a sentence that hit some waves. She said, "If you don't know how to lose, then you don't know how to win." And I think it's really such a powerful statement because, like, the best way to never fail is to never try. And part of what we're trying to do, I mean, some people just want a job and they want to, make a salary, put food on the table, and then use that to do other stuff, which I think is amazing and common. And many people in my life are like that. Some people are entrepreneurs. They want to wake up in the morning and drive change. And if you don't take any risk, then the change you're going to make is very small. If you want to make a big change, you need to take a big risk. And the big risk means that there's some likelihood that you fail. It's only a matter of time and statistics. So I feel that I've tried many things in my life, some small, some big, some succeeded, some failed. And I always tried to take the failures with a smile and to try to, wonder what I could have done better. And it really shaped my journey. And if I maybe need to choose one example to start with, I'll actually start with the startup that I started with a few friends. Let me strike that. I would say a startup that a few friends and I started together in the year 2004. We worked at a different startup that was acquired by Intel, which was initially great, but then working at Intel was not exactly how we wanted to live our lives. So we quit and we built another startup that we tried to craft a physical guitar that would be much better in multiple dimensions than any other guitar that exists. And we raised quite a lot of money, and we actually built a guitar with very sophisticated technology, an electric guitar. And then I'm simplifying just a little bit. No one wanted to buy it at the price that we had to charge for us to make a reasonable gross margin.
Right. Basic unit economics from day one just did not make sense.
Yes. And I thought at the time, I was very young, this was more than 20 years ago, that this is so surprising because the technology works so well. And there were questions that I didn't know how to ask. So I took that failure to realize that I don't understand anything about finance and unit economics. So I went as a software engineer and got an MBA majoring in finance because I felt that I have to develop those tools to understand them.
You had that knowledge gap. Yeah.
Exactly.
And is that a personality trait that you've always been like this? You've always accepted failure as a kid? I feel like it's something that either you mature into. Where did it come from? This need to take that feedback from that experience and immediately channeling that into a learning experience?
No, as a kid, I don't think I was very good at accepting failure. I remember, for example, I did judo, which is kind of my sport as a kid. I was terrible. Like, kids smaller than me would just throw me in the air, and it was devastating. And I tried, but it didn't work, and I felt really bad about those experiences. But I recall something just as another small story that shaped me, I think, as a human. As a child and as a teenager, when someone would make fun of me, I would really take it personally and offended, and it will ruin my week if some kid in high school laughed at me in front of other people or something. And then I became friends with someone who's become very close to me, a serial entrepreneur named Ishai Green. And I remember at high school, we already met back then, programming computer games. We weren't the cool kids. We were, the nerds. And he enjoyed people laughing at him. And I was shocked by that. And then he gave me this entire spiel about...
what strength, right? It's an incredible gift to be like that.
And he said, if people enjoy themselves by making fun of me, I'm going to enjoy with them, and the entire atmosphere will be better. So I'm going to laugh at myself, and everything will lighten up. And I really tried to adopt it, and it changed me. I started enjoying when people make fun of me, and I started making fun of myself, and it diffuses the situation. And it's part of, I think, this just taking everything a bit lightly, even when it feels like really dark and dramatic. But I did not grow up as a child like that. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I actually think that's such an interesting takeaway, right, from your friend, because I was going to think about like Santa, right? First of all, like was it incredible? Like it was like this rocket ship in many ways in terms of even that like PR blitz, and then right, like the aftermath of when you go to pivot, right? Some people would really internalize like to the ego, right? Like when I think about failure, right, like as much as I want it to be a learning experience, at the same time, right, it does hurt the ego. And I just be curious on, yeah, how do you actually put it into practice, right? Like, so how did, because it's a delicate line. Like for me, where my ego often gets impacted is when I feel like I've let people on my team down. So with Clay, right, when we pivoted, which was actually turned something that wasn't working into a success, right? We were able to find product market fit. But when I think about the failure, okay, on that journey, it's actually having to do those tough calls with people I really cared about who, you know, don't have that full picture to understand, right, how painful it was to do those, you know, to make those calls. And I think Santa probably you had a, you know, you probably had to do that at a much greater scale. I'm curious, like, how do you protect your ego to be able to go on to that next thing and to pivot? Like, just walk me through that.
Santa was a difficult episode in the sense that we had a very big idea at the time where we're talking about like late 2020. Money flows like water from venture capital into startups. We really tried our best to think and analyze unit economics before we started the company. We spent months on it before even raising money, and we ended up launching this beautiful, ice cream truck for adults that sells clothes
It's beautiful.
yeah,
So fun.
quite a few things went well. We launched it within 10 months from raising money. We reached about $1 million in annualized revenue 6 months after launching it. We had a large group of very happy customers that were repeatedly shopping with us. But the unit economics were horrible and they were not getting better. And as we analyzed it, we realized there were factors that we did not consider before. No, not that we didn't consider. It would be more accurate to say that they shocked us, but by how bad they were versus what we thought they would be. And the company was burning a lot of money at the time because it's a logistics operations company.
And a big team. Yeah.
Exactly. We reached almost 100 employees within a year and a half. Yeah, and this is mostly an operations team. It's like about a third of the company was product center, like R&D, etc. And at some point, I mean, we tried to pivot the idea a little bit. We gave it a few months to try to see whether we could sort of change the fundamentals. But when it became clear to us, and I'll speak for myself, when it became clear to me that this is simply never going to make money, then I felt the weight of the responsibility to our investors on my shoulders. And I felt that from the moment this realization hit, any day that we keep operating is taking this very good money that could be put in some other company that has a chance to succeed. And we set it on fire. And I used that spiritual energy of the responsibility to our VCs and to their LPs, etc., to say we need to shut it down as quickly as we can and basically return the money to our investors. And by that time, most of the money we raised was still in the bank account. So the pressure to shut down did not come because we needed to raise money or because we were running out, but because of an internal decision that it was devastating in many ways, because we loved the idea and we wanted it to succeed, and it was so ambitious and we worked so hard and the team was so amazing. And shutting down a company of that size and parting ways with so many amazing people is heartbreaking. But we felt it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah, the responsible thing.
I'm just curious to know, because I actually think my toughest part about being an entrepreneur and being a founder is, at the end of the day, you build these beautiful relationships but like you said, you're a steward for this company, you've raised money. And that's where like I think it becomes really hard, like managing the relationships of these people that really believed in the idea.
Right. Where is the loyalty? There's so much loyalty towards your investors, obviously, but there's a lot of loyalty that builds itself in the relationships with your team, and it's a hard one to balance.
First of all, it's tough. And in my own journey, I have evolved multiple times the way that I think about building a team and thinking
So
about
talk to us
team
about
members.
that. I want to know that.
Okay.
Tell me how
Okay.
that's evolved.
Okay.
Because I feel like we're going to learn something there because you really have had that journey. Even I think like probably your journey as an employee at WeWork, right? Probably actually has gone into that evolution.
Yeah. If I go back, let's say 15, 17 years ago, there was this movement in startups that was called hire fast, fire fast, right? Which the idea is that don't spend too much time on hiring people, and if you think someone's not working out, just let them go. Don't overthink it, etc. And then it evolved into hire slow, fire fast. So like spend a lot of time because firing is all very impersonal, right? Non-empathetic to the team. And I think that at the time of Soluto, this was just the sort of the bon ton. It's not that we were special in that. This is how the industry thought was the right way to behave. And I think part of my evolution in thinking about that was over time to develop a lot more loyalty to the team members that are joining me on my journey. This came together with another evolution, which is I used to think 10, 15 years ago that if I'm doing a good job and the team members are good, then they're going to stay with me forever and no one would leave. And that evolved into understanding that, talented people are sort of parking their talent with me for a couple of years, and then whatever we do together should be, a stepping stone for them to do something else. And at the same time, I realized that if I have to choose what kind of style I have, then I want to choose the style in which I'm as loyal to the team as I expect them to be to the company, not in the sense of staying forever, but in the sense of thinking about the customer problem, thinking about other team members, rising to the occasion, playing big picture rather than, small, turf wars, etc. And that's what made the Santa situation even more difficult because it met me at a point where my desire is to be as loyal as possible to the team, and that created a bit of the words coming out of my mouth are moral crisis, but I think it's a little bit of an exaggeration because in the internal discussions that we had before deciding what to do, we really tried to ask ourselves moral questions, like sort of basic moral principles. And maybe it's sugarcoating the situation, what I'm going to say, but our realization was that if this is not going to work, and we have two options, keep burning money, keep trying to fix the unfixable, and keeping people in this team, versus ripping off the Band-Aid, shutting down, and allowing people to spend this year at a place that's way more likely to lead them to where they want to go, then we even found the moral and spiritual place to say it's better for them in the grand scheme of things not to be part of something that we as entrepreneurs think is a failure.
And so did you communicate that with them when push comes to shove, when you had that conversation? Obviously, how did you turn that quote unquote failure into a positive experience, not only for yourself, obviously, but for your entire team?
So I didn't, and I also don't think it was my place to. And I'll try to explain what I mean by that. I think that there's a non-reciprocal relationship between a founder, CEO, and team members. And to think that both sides are the same in this kind of a conversation is just not right. Right, because when one side fires the other, it's extremely important, in my view, to respect the tragedy of the situation and that it is not the same on both sides. That would be an understatement. And so when we came to speak to the team, the last thing I wanted to do was to make excuses or explain why it's actually good for them, right? What we wanted to do was to tell our truth, explain the rationale from a business perspective, and it may sound weird, but to leave room for grief, because and there are different kinds of grief, and I don't want to make comparisons to other kinds of grief, but there is a sort of a grief in being let go from a company, and there's a different kind of grief when something that you worked on, that you loved, that you saw so many positive signals about, just is just gone, right?
And so it sounds like you're open about sharing this vulnerability with people around you, within your team, with your investors. Was there one specific example where you found that being vulnerable and being open about these struggles actually like paid off in a way that you were not expecting?
I think where the topic we just discussed did come up was with many one-on-one conversations I had with team members after the fact. Some wanted to talk the same day. Some wanted to talk after a week. Some wanted to talk after 6 months to sort of bring all that they were feeling and sort of, confront me with how they felt and their grief, etc. And there, once the dust has settled a little bit, I was able to have deeper conversations about what it was on the other side. And I'd like to say that first, we have a couple of team members that were part of Santa that are now part of the current company my partner, Maya, and I are building. And I've stayed in touch with many others. I was a reference to most on their journey, and I have no doubt that many of them, in some place in their psyche, are still pissed at me, maybe forever will be. But I have to live in peace with that and to understand that I can't have everyone be happy all the time about everything. I love them all. I will say that. I love them all eternally.
And any guidelines to bounce back from that grief? Any steps that have worked for you? It's obviously a grieving process for you to let these people go, to close down this big idea that you loved. What tips can you share on bouncing back?
I'll be tactical and strategic. So tactically speaking, I think it's important to acknowledge that failure takes time to bounce off of. And first, I remember sitting with one of our lead investors and a good friend for many years, Michael Eisenberg, and I'm now recording from Aleph's recording studio right now. I remember I sat with him, and as part of the decision to start another company back then, and he said, "I'm with you, Roee, but I have one condition. You have to take at least 2 weeks and do nothing, absolutely nothing, but spending time with family, with friends." And tactically speaking, people tend to underestimate the importance of a vacation, to just let the emotions, dissipate a little bit, and then let all this red cloud around you, because time really fixes most things. And it was a very powerful recommendation. A little bit more than that, I think that reflecting on what went wrong is also very healing, especially through asking the questions, what could I have done differently so that I would have not reached that point? And sometimes the category of answers is, I should have never started this. And sometimes it's a set of decisions that I could have taken differently. But the second tactical thing I want to say is that it's also important not to wallow, right? Not to dwell too much on this question, because just as an example with Santa, and this is me just reflecting with a couple more years of being able to think back, we started together with many other startups at the same time under the category of super fast delivery. To the best of my knowledge, not a single one of those
succeeded
in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah.
And so we were, from a funding perspective, at the right place at the right time, but from a sort of collective mirage of what could work, and right, we were at the wrong place at the wrong time. Today, this startup could have never started because there's a lot more aggregated industry knowledge about the unit economics of this field from a group of startups, including Santa. Still, it was difficult for me to try and find things I would have done differently. And here I would laugh about another personality trait. I would say that is, I'm partly joking, but I would say I apologize for nothing, which is a little bit the spirit with which I try things, and people know what they're getting into. And we had a budget, and we never spent more money than we told our investors we will, and it didn't work. I mean, we all wanted it to work. It didn't work. I'm not apologizing to myself or to anyone else that we gave it a try. And because sometimes you try and it works, and sometimes you try and it doesn't work. And
it leads you to a better place. Like, I think that's what I think is really interesting, right? Like, I'm sure that journey of Santa, right, has now actually positioned you in a much stronger place, right? Even though it's an entirely different business. And it's interesting because I think, Roee, we share a similar trait in, like, we're dreamers. We can drink the Kool-Aid of a ridiculous idea and fall in love with it and get so amped up about it and sell this dream to so many other people. And then, when I think about our pivots, because Alex and I, right, we're really our ventures are always, whatever idea we start with, it's not going to be the one that we end with. That's for sure. But I often am like, what I'm trying to learn is how do you not drink the Kool-Aid for too long, right? Like, you fall in love with an idea, but then when can you realize, stop selling that dream to yourself and be really realistic and understand, and I'd just be curious, because I think there's been a lot of different dreams and really big dreams that you've been on the journey with. And has there been any learnings on how you would do that pivot sooner, or how you think about drinking that Kool-Aid?
It's a great question. I think that first, in the most basic sense, the venture capital industry, which is the startup industry, has a really nice mechanism to solve that problem, which is that you usually raise money for a certain amount of time, and that caps your ability to bullshit people to what
for
you can
long.
do in that period of time. So in the most basic sense, if you're about to run out of money and you don't have strong enough signals to convince investors to put more money, then there's very high likelihood that your idea does not have justification to exist, right? That being said, sometimes, like in Santa, this is not the case, right? And so I think there's sort of there's like a top line part and there's a bottom line part. On the top line part, you should have goals and you should have metrics, and those should represent what it means to succeed, right? So when we try to think in our company today, in a year from now, how do we know if we're successful or not, right? Then there needs to be 3 to 5 things that are numeric, that you can say, this thing will be at that value, this thing, and it could be the number of users or their daily engagements or revenue or profitability, whatever the case may be. You should be able to look into the future and say, if this, and that are X, Y, Z, right? Then it means that we were successful. And if you're not getting even close, That's one very big signal internally, not just in the sense that you can maybe convince investors that you can fix it, etc. It should be right, like an inherent point to go and look at it. The second, which was more relevant in Santa, is if there are hard costs and if you're basically burning a lot of money. And if you're burning a lot of money, then you should have a much, much, much lower threshold to, to think about the hard questions and to answer them quickly, because for the most part, this is not your money, right? If it's your money, you can do whatever you want with it. But if it's other people's money, then you have to morally really, really care about it.
Yeah, and talk to me a little bit more about that and the pressure of raising a massive seed round and how that plays into your perspective and how you navigate failure differently or not. How does the big round of financing impact your how you view failure?
I'm not sure that it did. I think that there's like various pendulums moving in our market, right? And whatever, at Soluto in 2008, there was the seed round was I believe $2 million. Felt like a lot of money. We built a lot of stuff with it, and then we raised. I believe the seed later on was 5 or 8. I forget now. It was 15 years ago, but it was like a huge amount of money, and it felt like we could do everything with it. And then at 2019 and 2020, a pre-seed of $10 million became commonplace, and the seed of 20 became commonplace. And the thought wasn't that you're raising the seed so that you could have a runway of 5 years. The thought was you're going to work with it still for 2 years or 2.5 years, but you're going to spend it faster by building a larger team faster and then getting into revenue faster. And this growth at all costs that was, I think, a collective mindset. WeWork may have been a poster child of this approach, but anyone who was there in that industry knows this was commonplace. VCs were encouraging that approach. And I think everyone had a realization that you can't take top line that goes up in a company that's losing a lot of money to just generate it and assume that this will someday become a profitable business. You just can't assume that. In some industries, it's more likely than in others, but making this assumption is disastrous. And this is why we saw so many companies go down in value in like 80 to 90%. Some of them have climbed up since, but yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to say, when I reflect back, and I reflect back a lot, I always try to also go in a time machine to what was the spirit of the time back then, because we could have gone and raised the seed of $3 million, and we could have gotten it, but from the investors' perspective at the time, they would have just as well given us 10. So, and in great terms. So, what are we, idiots? Should we just say no to that? So, as an entrepreneur, you have to maximize your position. Now, you shouldn't be greedy, and other companies raised a lot more than us, and we had a very strict plan for what we're going to do with that money, and it was very clear with the board, etc. But still, you have to maximize your position because there's tension on both sides of the table.
So essentially, because it had became a standard practice to raise these massive seed rounds, the pressure was not as much as it would have been, at a different time, a smaller round like at Soluto and such. But it did become more pressure as you were burning cash and the unit economics were not adding up. Then the pressure of fundraising and burning that cash that's not yours became more of a consideration.
What I'm trying to say on that, I guess, is that a few years earlier, if this would have been 1/5 of the amount, but comparatively speaking, burning the same amount, like 1/5 of what I would have still felt the pressure to do that. Yeah, because it's like the pendulum is like a multiple on everything that's happening, but it does not change the fundamental relationship.
You're still burning someone else's cash, no matter how much they gave you, and you still want to run a profitable business that works.
Yeah.
So I know you're I have so many entrepreneurs who are always connect me to Roee, which I do. But I'd be curious to know, for you, when you meet with founders, okay, early stage founders who are about to embark on, raising their first round, what are the red flags when you see a company that you're like, that from my own journey of failures, this is not going to happen, or the ones that you're like, wow, this is really solid? Like, what are the metrics, or what are the high level signals to you that a company is like a rock star company and is going to succeed and you want to get in on it, and ones that, could be a great founding team, but it's just the wrong idea?
It's a heavy one, Lee.
And we'll talk very early stage, like right before Olive and before Michael Eisenberg's got in on it. So like, which are the ones that you'd say, Michael, you have to meet with Lee and Alex, or like, Michael, you have to meet with them. Or ones that you're just like, listen, I love you guys, but I just can't do those intros because your company is X, Y, and Z.
I'll start by quoting sort of a famous truism in the startup industry, which is, ideas are meaningless, execution is all that matters. And I'll take that to sort of answer the question. And it's a much easier question, what would red flags be, than it is how do you know if something, like I could try to give examples, but there's no playbook for that, right?
What gets you excited? No, but you don't have to name startups. So like, what are some startups you saw that you were like, wow, this is great, right? And I'm like,
no, so even, but I do want to answer the red flags. I think it's a great question, and gladly I've been through enough successes and enough failures that
I've
gained enough experience at failing. So I think that here are a few things. Number one is the lack of founder market fit, and I'm connecting this to ideas are meaningless, execution is all that matters. When a team comes with an idea, but they have absolutely no connection to the market intricacies, then it's a red flag. Now, it doesn't mean, like, it could be some markets are easier to get to than others, but in tech, mostly, especially if you're going to a complex market, like I've heard so many entrepreneurs having ideas in healthcare when they have no clue about how that world works. And I'm just hearing this idea.
We experienced that. We experienced exactly that. We launched a healthcare startup, and we didn't know the ins and out, and then ended up pivoting into something else. So I think that's a great example.
That's a great example. And you were trying to do something with a very strong consumer flair to it. I'm talking about even people who are doing something that's like back office systems for, privately insured. No, it sounds like a great idea, but if you don't come from this world, if you don't have actual experience, there are just so many assumptions that you're getting wrong. And when I meet such a company, I'm never discouraging because I don't know. Like, when I hear an idea, I prefer to assume that I'm sitting in front of the next Steve Jobs and that I'm the one who's not getting it, versus assuming that I know everything and they don't know what they're doing. So I try to steer them into questions about, have they spoken to people who are the actual buyer persona? And have they, and do they even know how to interview those people, and not just asking reassuring questions, right? The sort of the mom test, right? So that's, I think, one thing that I'm seeing a lot. And my biggest advice always to teams that I see where I feel there's a lack of founder market fit is, find another founder who comes from that industry. It is possible to succeed without it by having advisors, etc. And there's always the cases where out of the blue, a company with zero founder market fit can become successful. But I've seen that as such a huge cause for failure in the earliest of stages. So that's one. The second is not thinking about the complexities of go-to-market. And I'll just give a small example. When we were brainstorming, my partner, Mai, and me, one of the markets that we got really excited about, that we thought about building a startup in, was the world of physical experiences, such as amusement parks and museums. And you look at this market and how the systems for you to buy tickets and then to scan them, and then what they give you access to, and all of these kids and family packs, and from Disneyland to the smallest gallery in whatever. And we realized that there is actually quite a big opportunity there because there are a few legacy players, very little innovation. It's really complex. Those are expensive. So like many companies are paying a lot of money for something that could be a lot better. Like these are a few kind of markers that like, okay, that's interesting. But when we dived into it, our conclusion was that the go-to-market will be something that we don't know how to solve, because it's not like they all go to one conference and they buy stuff, and it's not like you can advertise to them on Facebook. And we just couldn't think of a way to create a cost-effective marketing machine for us to be able to get to them. The only idea we had was a lot of salespeople, and when you run the numbers, it can never make money. So it could have been that if we were less experienced, we would have built this because it sounded cool and it felt like a big market. But having thought about this thing killed this idea. And I oftentimes meet entrepreneurs who have, a great example for that will be a new CRM, right? Like everyone hates their CRM, so we're going to build a better one. But the problem with succeeding with a CRM company is not to make a product people love. It's go to market, it's competition, it's a red ocean, etc., etc. Right? And the last thing that I would say that I see as a common topic that I consider a red flag, and then I try to give a lot of advice around, is thinking too small. Too small, yeah. So a company that has this really awesome idea, but I do like a back of the envelope calculation in my head, and I'm like, if this gets 50% of the market, it's going to make $20 million a year. Like it's just not big enough. So then the way that I always think about it is to say, let's assume you get to all your goals tomorrow. What would you do next? Right? Like what is the next step? How can this be framed as something that's a first step towards something a lot bigger? And how can this, aim for the skies? I think these are topics that I've seen quite often that I hope people spend a lot more time thinking about them before they go and raise money, because it will just not only improve their chances, but result in, better companies being built.
That's really helpful. Yeah, and what's the last company you've seen most recently where you're like, this is going to work, and why? And I want a company that's like so early stage, they haven't even gone out to meet investors yet. Why did it get you that little, like, I don't know, like that little buzz inside you being like, I need in on this. I need to be an advisor on that because this thing's going to be big. And so just tell me, like, what was the signal that they gave you? Like, what made you feel like that?
So I'm just saying, there are two companies that got me excited in the past couple months. Okay. So one of them is a group of people that are trying to take a fascinating problem in the world of cryptocurrency, in which I'm a small enthusiast, definitely not an expert on, but of a core mathematical issue that they think if they're able to solve, they're able to make a very interesting dent in how the entire global infrastructure of crypto works. And what got me excited about them is that I know those people. They are just geniuses at trying to solve hyper complex problems. And I just got so excited that they're tackling such a huge problem. And these are people who, let's say, they don't have to work. They're choosing to build this company because it's just such a big, interesting problem, and they have such a big and interesting idea on how to solve it. But that's like cheating a little bit, because these are serial entrepreneurs, and the likelihood of success is just a lot higher because they've proven themselves before, right? The other company that I became really interested in is a company that's trying to build a defense technology product to try and solve what's called friendly fire. There's a very interesting challenge in armies all around the world of what's called friendly fire. You may accidentally shoot someone from your own team. It's been attempted to be solved in the US with multiple kinds of technologies, but they think they have a solution that can solve it. It's super complex from the different kind of wireless technologies that you need on all sides, and it just anything that relates to saving human lives sort of immediately has like kind of has a high bar.
But wait, can I just jump in really quickly? But the go to markets for both those two seem very challenging. So I'm just thinking about your red flags. Is it that there's such a big idea that you're kind of like, listen, the go to market's going to be tricky, but if they get it right, then it works?
And the team's
both
right.
Of the yeah.
Oh, so I'll dive in, and I'll say so with the first company, it's one of those things that takes a lot of time to build, that if you're able to prove with metrics that it's a lot better than anything that exists, then different platforms are simply going to start using it. It's a market that deals with numbers and performance, and so the difficult thing is to prove that what you built actually works. But if you do, then it gets adopted. No, I'm not trying to downplay. It's going to be a horrible challenge for it to become a business success. But that's the kind of market they're operating in. With the defense company, the initial questions I asked them were about, has it been proven? Has it been field tested? Who have you partnered with? And they actually tested it with a few units, and they have already initial validation, and they already have interest from relevant parties. And when I looked at all of this together, I said there's something real here, right?
There's some validation, yeah.
Cool.
Well, wow, Roee, you've shared so much with us. It's quite incredible. I've missed these conversations so much. But before we wrap up, since you've given us all so much advice, I would love to also hear what is one piece of advice that you've received recently for someone that you'd want to share with our listeners?
Trying to take I'm surrounded by quite a few mentors that I go to when I have difficult questions weighing on me. I think that there's one piece of advice that keeps coming up always, which is, to sum it up in 2 words, it's Roee, chill. Sometimes I'll be, too much in my head and overthinking things, and
like that 1 week vacation advice. Go on vacation, Roee.
No, but it's like, sometimes like I'm kind of always dissatisfied. I want the numbers to be better. I want to do more work and have more impact. And it's like, just sometimes you just have to lean back for a second, take a breath, just relax.
Love that.
The second piece of advice, I can't get into details, but I would just say that there was a moment in time in which I had to decide whether I'm going on a small fight on behalf of someone who I care deeply about in the professional world against pretty strong people who were trying to make life difficult for that person. And it was a little bit putting myself on the line, and I wasn't sure whether I should get into this mess. And I consulted about. I opened it up with one of my closest mentors. His name is Jeff Schwartz, and that he's just a phenomenal person, a phenomenal mentor, and phenomenal friend. And he basically said that caring about people is sort of should be a top level thing for us as human beings, and that if I think someone's being wronged and I can make a difference, then I should put myself on the line and go fight.
Yeah.
Which is what I did, and the results ended up being very positive.
Incredible! Wow, that's really good advice.
Yeah. So fight for the people. First of all, care about people, and fight for the people you care about.
What a great way to end this episode. Thank you so much. This was so great.
Thank you, Roee.
Thank you so much, Alex and Lee. Always
Thanks for being
an amazing pleasure.